It was a small, sunlit house at the edge of Maplewood Lane, surrounded by whispering pines and the slow hum of summer. Inside that house lived Grandma Eleanor, a woman whose hands were wrinkled by years of work, but whose heart remained softer than the bread she used to bake every Sunday morning. She had spent her life taking care of others, her late husband, her children, and then her grandchildren. Her home carried the scent of lavender and baked cookies, and though her eyes had grown dim, they still sparkled when she spoke about family. Eleanor had never been rich. She had worked part-time jobs after her husband passed, sewing for neighbors, selling homemade jam, and quietly saving every dollar she could. She kept her savings tucked away in a small account that no one knew much about. It wasn't a fortune, but to her it was peace of mind. A safety net. A reminder that she was still capable of standing on her own feet. Her son, Richard, and daughter-in-law, Melissa, visited often, but not for love. They came with smiles too polished, compliments too forced, and eyes that always seemed to wander toward her purse or her desk drawers. Richard had lost his job months ago, but instead of trying to rebuild, he began to rely on his mother's kindness. Melissa, meanwhile, played the role of a loving daughter-in-law while quietly urging him to convince Eleanor to share what she had saved. One afternoon, when Eleanor mentioned her savings account with a proud smile, Richard's eyes gleamed. He listened carefully as she spoke about how she'd saved for emergencies and for her grandchildren's education. That night, he made a plan, one that would forever change the family. A week later, Eleanor noticed something odd. The mailman brought a letter from the bank, one she hadn't requested. Her savings account had been accessed, her funds transferred. Panic ran through her veins as she realized what had happened. She tried to reach Richard, but he didn't answer. Her calls went straight to voicemail. Hours turned into days, and her worst fear became clear. Her own family had stolen from her. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, staring at the letter with trembling hands. Her heart didn't break because of the money. It broke because of the betrayal. That night, she sat by the window, watching the fading sunset. Her eyes filled with tears, but behind them, something stronger began to rise, a quiet, powerful determination. She wasn't going to beg for her money back. She wasn't going to cry for their forgiveness. She would show them that the woman they thought was weak had one more lesson to teach. And so, the soft-hearted grandmother everyone thought they could take advantage of began to plan her revenge. The next morning, Eleanor woke before dawn. The world outside was still asleep, but inside her mind, ideas were spinning like the gears of an old clock. She knew her children expected her to remain silent, to act helpless, to forgive them because that's what she'd always done. But this time, she would be silent for a different reason. She went to the attic, where boxes of memories were stacked, photos, letters, old sewing supplies, and journals from her youth. She pulled out her late husband's box, the one marked with his initials, HD inside. She found the faded envelope that contained property papers from long ago, land she'd inherited, but never spoken about. It wasn't worth millions, but it was valuable. No one in the family knew it existed. That was when her plan took shape. She would rewrite her will, transfer her remaining small assets quietly, and prepare a final surprise that would leave everyone speechless. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor visited the bank, the lawyer, and an old friend who had once worked in real estate. She moved with calm precision, acting like nothing had happened. When Richard and Melissa stopped by, she greeted them with her usual warm smile and even offered them dinner. They thought her silence meant forgiveness, but in truth, she was observing them, studying their greed. At night, she wrote letters. One for her lawyer, one for her grandchildren, and one for Richard and Melissa. Each letter carried her truth and her justice. Then she began her performance. She started to act weaker, more forgetful, as if her mind was slipping. She let the family believe she was losing her memory. Richard even joked about putting her in assisted living, not knowing it was exactly what she wanted him to think. The more helpless she appeared, the more careless they became. They began selling her furniture, taking her jewelry, even moving into her house under the pretense of taking care of her. But Eleanor stayed calm. Every move they made was another note in the melody of their downfall. When the papers were signed and her will was sealed, Eleanor smiled for the first time in weeks. The plan was ready. All that remained was time and patience. Within a month, Eleanor's home didn't feel like hers anymore. The walls were painted over, her husband's old chair thrown out, and laughter echoed through the halls. But it wasn't the kind of laughter that warmed hearts. It was the sound of greed celebrating victory. Richard and Melissa had moved in fully, claiming they were there to help her manage things. They redecorated, held gatherings, and even told neighbors they'd taken responsibility for Grandma's affairs. Eleanor watched quietly from her corner chair, her eyes pretending to be tired, but her mind sharper than ever. Her grandchildren, Lily and James, visited occasionally, confused by the changes. They missed the old warmth of Grandma's home. Eleanor hugged them tightly, whispering love into their ears while keeping her secret safe.